Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and in today's video we're going to be going over my build for patch 3.9 Conquerors of the Atlas. So this isn't going to be your traditional kind of league start video. This is going to be me going through what my build for the new patch will be, and I'm not going to be going too much into detail about how to level it or kind of how to gear it up in the mid game, as most of that is covered by my latest Tornado Shot guide. And that is right, I am again playing Tornado Shot because it is still, in my opinion, the best possible skill and has actually received buffs in the form of the new Awakened Gems. So definitely pretty interesting there. I want to quickly go over why I think Tornado Shot is still the best choice though, as it is traditionally not considered a bossing skill. So to begin with, let's go into that. So, in patch 3.9 we have both the Metamorph League and we have the new Conquerors of the Atlas content. But in addition to that, we also have the old content being moved to Zana, which will be on a map-by-map basis. So all three of these kind of content streams require the player to be able to clear maps quickly to get to that kind of content as fast as possible, but also have enough damage to be able to do the bosses or something like that that come out of these encounters, whether that's Shaper Guardians, Conquerors, or the Metamorph kind of amalgams. So you definitely want to have a character that moves as fast as possible while also being able to kill these bosses at a reasonable rate, which is key. And I believe a bow build is going to be best for that. And that's exactly what we'll be going into in this video. So I'll be showing you off all of my kind of choices, talking about them a little bit, and giving you guys a full guide on how you can kind of reach the end game with a reasonably budgeted bow build. Reasonably in quotes there. Now, obviously some of this stuff will be kind of expensive, but I will go into detail why I think it's so good. So, to begin with though, the journey starts with the Void Fletcher Quiver. This is a very powerful item and it will be one of the keystones of a bow boss killing build. Now, it's not in turn like necessarily essential, but it is going to be a very big boost to your damage, adding in a ton of like kind of burst damage potential as well as sustain damage. So let's get into how it works really quickly, and then we'll talk about how to optimize it. So to begin with, you'll notice I have 5 Void arrows. These are arrows that recharge constantly while you're using the Void Fletcher Quiver, and each of these represents a cast of Void Shot, which is this thing here. You'll see it explodes. Every time you use any sort of bow attack, it will shoot these out as long as you have a charge. And as you can see here, they recharge very quickly, almost to the point where I can just spam them constantly. And if you're running around kiting like a boss like Ubereld or something like that, you're going to get an absolute ton of these, and pretty much never be below like an amount of stacks, which is pretty interesting. If you're interested to see how much damage these do, you can see here on the tooltip, mine does about 13,000 right now without my flasks up. Cool, so that's Void Shot. Now a few more things about Void Shot though is, you'll notice that I'm shooting out 2 Void Shots here. That's because it scales with projectiles on your gear and your tree. So the reason I'm shooting 2 right now is because I'm a Deadeye and I have the +1 projectile. These area kind of like blasts also of course scale with area of effect, which you do get quite a lot of as a Deadeye on the tree. Now, why is this important? The reason this is important is because the explosions actually overlap and shotgun on the boss, leading to that 13,000 damage suddenly becoming times 4, 5, or 6, and the area of effect actually helps that happen a lot more consistently. So suddenly you're starting to do big chunks of, like 60, 70, even 100,000 damage with your flasks up, and that's going to be really good. Now, another thing with Void Fletcher is, though, that of course you're going to have tons of these stacks here. So how can you kind of dump these stacks and get them all into the boss while you're kiting around and make sure you're getting maximum use out of your quiver? There's an interesting interaction with the Barrage gem here, and every time an arrow comes out of the Barrage shot, you'll actually trigger Void Fletcher and Void Shot, essentially allowing you to dump a ton of Void charges into the boss for a massive spike of burst damage. I can show you guys what that looks like here with Dying Sun and of course Barrage. So you'll see here that I get just a ton of explosions here, all of them overlapping and all of them potentially doing a ton of damage. Now of course you do not want to always spam Barrage because you won't always have the Void Shots because this depletes them so quickly, but using a combination of Barrage and Tornado Shot might be an optimal way to be able to burst bosses down and insta-phase some fights. So definitely pretty interesting there. And that is kind of Void Shot, which will obviously not be essential, but will be a very big kind of upgrade once you do finally get your hands on it. In addition to that though, you also do need to consider some other items that synergize very well with this quiver. Stuff like Arborix and Death's Opus will add additional explosions to the Void Shot quiver, which is pretty cool in my opinion. So with all that said, let's get into the build and we'll start talking about our choices. So we'll bring up Path of Building here and we'll get into the nitty gritty. So overall with my current character there, I do just want to say that I get about 400,000 damage from a barrage hit added on because of Void Fletcher with 6 arrows, and that is quite a sizable amount, and that's without Flasks active, so pretty cool indeed. Now let's get into pure tornado shot damage though, because of course we can't rely on the quiver completely, as that would make us a bit of a one-trick pony. So we'll quickly start off with the tree here. Basically, as opposed to old builds, I have moved away from movement speed and I focused a lot more on damage as well as health. You can see that we have a total of almost 5k life here, which is a pretty reasonable amount for a bow character. We also picked up phase acrobatics and acrobatics, giving us a ton of dodge and spell dodge. And we're also going to be using aspect of the cat along with Farrell's fur to provide a further 10% damage avoidance in most cases when we have cat stealth, so we end up with about 40% dodge chance, which is pretty nice if you do ask me. Of course, we are using quite a few jewels. We're using the Lionized Fall still, and we're also using an Unnatural Instinct over here, but you can completely drop this if you don't want to go down that route. So pretty interesting here. In addition to that, we're also using Point Blank due to the fact that it is just a massive damage increase, but you can also drop this one here. You will sacrifice quite a bit of damage there, but of course you don't need that much damage in my opinion, so you could drop this for a bit of quality of life. Just see how it feels for you. Overall though, of course, Tornado Shot did receive that adjustment, and we may need to invest in a little bit more projectile speed, and it's completely fine to do so. You can drop a little bit of damage, or you can drop a little bit of life and take a ton of projectile speed down here as a whopping 40% if you're noticing a little bit of an issue with your clear speed. Also, we do have 100% increased accuracy, which is pretty cool as well, so always going to be hitting. That's a big key factor as well. So with all that summed up, let's get into the gear and we'll start discussing some of those choices. So to start off with, we're using a Death's Opus. This bow should be fairly cheap. It's not too crazy, but it has an absolute ton of awesome scaling damage on it. We have the fizz, obviously, and then we also have the arrows, as well as 100% global crit multi. This is being used instead of a traditional dex stacking bow because they obviously got nerfed so much and are still going to be pretty expensive to make. Without knowing the new kind of influence mods, we can't know if there'll be anything better than Death's Opus, but this is going to be a very excellent starting point, and you can expect to make a lot of damage just out of this build with this. Alternatively though, if you want to go for a bit of a different route, you can go with the Arborix bow, and that's going to be a pretty good option as well. There are quite a few advantages to each of these different bows. I would recommend Death's Opus for players who don't have Headhunter and are just looking to do bossing and normal mapping, but once you get Headhunter in Headhunter situations, so like 5-way domains of Tum's Conflict, Delve, and like mapping, like sometimes, you will probably want to be using the Arborix because Headhunter grants a ton of physical as additional elemental modifiers, and Arborix just has more damage on it. In addition to this, as a physical item, you can now go and chase that 28% quality and juice up your damage even more. So as we discussed, we're using the Void Fletcher here. Before you get Void Fletcher, you probably want to look at a rare quiver with 1 arrow, or you want to be looking at probably a Rigwald's Quills, as that will come into play later on as we talk about the build. Next up, we have Star Conjurer's Head. The Tornado Shot Helmet enchant is just a quality of life. You probably don't need that in the next league, but Star Conjurer's is a nice solid pick. You can also use a rare helmet though if you want to shore up your resists, and that also can help you solve your attribute problem. That is a little bit of an issue with this build. You can grab the attributes on the rings instead of grabbing resists, and grab the resists on your helmet if you want. Next up, we have Farrell's Fur. So traditionally, the chest piece slot for bows has been pretty interchangeable. You can either go with the Abyss chest piece, you can go with Farrell's, you can go with Hiri's Eye, or you can go with Queen of the Forest. For this league, I believe Queen of the Forest is pretty much knocked out of the running because you need that damage to do bosses, and the Abyss chest piece isn't quite as good as Farrell's or Heery's for really any situation. So overall, for mapping, you'd probably want to use a Heery's Ire because it gives you a ton of flat damage, and for bossing, you probably want to use Farrell's Fur as it allows you to maintain frenzy and charges, like power charges as well, and it'll allow you to kind of consistently get a massive damage bump. But in maps, you can kind of rely on your Curse on Hit and Blood Rage to give you those charges, whereas you don't need Farrell's Fur. But in pure bossing situations, you will need that, as there's nothing really to kill or curse, so it's kind of a bit of a toss-up. Farrell's Fur is better if you don't have charge generation than Heery's Ire in terms of damage. It also has the life, but if you have charge generation, then you probably want to go with Heery's Ire, as it does give you a lot more damage. Next up, we have Tomb Fist, of course. It grants Intimidate and also gives you a ton of damage from the Abyss Jewels, so a no-brainer there. You're going to want to pick these up early as they will become very expensive, as it is an attack bow-focused league. So definitely pretty good there. We do have 2 Searching Eyes in here, but of course you would want a Murderous one in there for the Intimidate. Overall, I think the best stats for this build will, of course, be life, cold damage, and then some attack speed, as Death's Opus and Arborix are quite slow base attack speeds on the bow, so you do need to make up for that somewhat. Next up, we just have some normal rare boots. Pretty much anything with resists and movement speed will get the job done. A nice easy slot to fill there. For the amulet, I'm going to be using Pandemonious. This is just a massive damage increase, and it also has some defensive aspects in it. It will allow you to blind enemies that you chill for 1 second, which is really a big deal because that'll stack up really nicely with your evasion, and most auto attacks won't be able to hit you, which is pretty cool. Next up, we have Circle of Fear. This is a synthesis ring, and the modifiers you're looking for on this are 55% or any percent increased cold damage while affected by Herald of Ice, as well as Herald of Ice increased buff effect. Basically, this is going to not only increase your cold damage, but also increase the flat cold damage you get from Herald of Ice to a nice fat amount. So it's a very good ring, and it also has some flat cold damage on there anyway, and flat cold damage is one of our best stats by far. So definitely pretty interesting. Next up, we have just a normal ring. Just fill out your resists and grab a bit of damage in life if you can. This is a pretty nice one, but just grab what you can. Lastly, we have a Stygian Vice here, with just a ton of life, elemental damage, resist, all that kind of stuff. Same as the boots and the ring. Just show up your resists, grab damage if you can, and the life. So over the flasks, in bossing scenarios, flasks aren't typically going to be always up, but for certain bosses, like for example the Breach Lords, Bestiary bosses, and stuff like that, you can burst and one-shot a boss with your flasks up. I'm not sure if the new Conquerors are going to be quite like that, but I imagine the Metamorph stuff will be, so flasks are definitely going to be pretty interesting, and you'll notice without flasks, my damage definitely goes down a lot. So flasks are definitely very powerful and give you a massive burst window. So definitely try and pick up a Dying Sun if you can. Will be quite expensive, but everything else is super easy to grab, and it'll offer you a kind of mix of clear speed and damage. Lastly, of course, we have the rest of the jewels here. Pretty much same path of the course. You want to be looking for damage, attack speed, and life. So let's quickly jump over here to the skills. So we do, of course, have Tornado Shot linked up like this. If you're not comfortable with damage on full life, you can swap this out for Cold Penetration or something like that. But most of the time, you will be on full health as a bow build because you're either dodging or you're avoiding the mechanics yourself mechanically. And you do, of course, have Leech as well, which will help you. There is an option here for most players to turn most of these kind of gems into Awakened gems. I believe there's an Awakened gem for Hypothermia, Added Cold, Elemental Damage, and GMP. The only one I don't think there is for damage on full life, so it's possible an Awakened gem could take the place of damage on full life anyway, and give you a little bit of a cool thing there. So over here we have our normal Herald of Ice, Curse on Hit setup. Nothing too much to see there. We can also take a look here. We have just the normal clearing stuff, a Vile Haste for mapping and a Hatred for bossing. We're using Hatred due to the fact that we're a physical based cold build, and it's going to give you the most bang for your buck. Having said that though, if you can get a Watcher's Eye, this will also synergize very well with that, as added cold damage, penetration, crit, all that kind of stuff on any Hatred Watcher's Eye is going to jump your damage up significantly, although they will be quite rare. Next up we have just, the normal stuff like here. We're using a level 6 precision here to get to 100% hit chance, and this is the reason that I have the Enlighten on here. If you're okay going below 100% hit chance, you can of course drop that Enlighten completely and you won't need to worry. But if you do want to get that 100%, you will need an Enlighten to be able to run all three of these auras comfortably. Also, we're using some Enlightening Golem because our attack speed is one of our best stats, and of course Blood Rage and Blink Arrow. Now I will say here, there is about a 6 link worth of gems open for use, and I would say that you probably want to be looking at the following setups to slot into there, and I haven't really tested them out yet myself, so I can't really say. You can either go with the Ballista setup, which could be pretty interesting. Having said that though, Ballistas do feel like a little bit of overkill for bossing, as they don't really contribute to your clear speed at all, and you already have enough damage with Void Fletcher and your base Tornado Shot to kind of destroy anything anyway. So maybe not Ballistas, but you could potentially go down a different route, and that is the new Ensnaring Arrow, which gives you a bit of crowd control and 20% more projectile damage with a curse on hit setup. What this will allow you to do is essentially apply a curse and a 20% more damage multiplier to the bosses that you're fighting. You can also attach that with Mirage Archer so that it continually does this for you, and you just have to fire one off every now and then. Which is pretty interesting in my opinion, and you can also potentially attach that to the barrage support to get the Void Fletcher to trigger like we were in game here with the kind of dumping of stacks, although we have to test that and see if barrage support works the way barrage does. So pretty interesting there. With one of the new Awakened gems as well, added Curse Support Plus, I think it's called, or something like that. You can actually have Curse on Hit apply 2 curses with that, allowing you to apply like something like Assassin's Mark as well as Projectile Weakness, giving you absolutely insane damage and taking you way past 10 million DPS on Shaper boss targets. So it's pretty crazy indeed. So now in terms of kind of just like some of the stats here, of course, we do have a very respectable amount of movement speed still, which is quite good. And we also, of course, have our resist capped, and we have around 5k life. In terms of the DPS department with Flasks up and Point Blank, I'll quickly do the math for you guys here. So we're on about 618,000 and we have 11 arrows total with GMP Awakened version, which not everyone will have. We'll do 10 arrows just for the video because not everyone will have that. So you have about 6.2 million DPS excluding Void Fletcher, which will give you another large amount of burst damage with your Flasks up, probably to the area of around 1 million every time you use a barrage, which is pretty damn solid in my opinion. And even without Flasks up, you will be doing a considerable amount of damage, somewhere in the 3 million range, I would say, because of course you maintain those frenzy and power charges from Farrell and all that kind of stuff. Mentioning Farrell though, you of course don't have the benefits of Farrell aspect here, because obviously I can't add that into Path of Building. So yeah, overall the build looks pretty solid. So you got a ton of movement speed, ton of damage, and a ton of survivability, kind of adding up to a pretty powerful brew in my opinion, which can do pretty much all the content in the game at, in my opinion, the fastest rate. Not only will you be able to do all the new content, but you'll also be able to tackle all the old content as well, like Blight, Domain of Timeless Conflict. Tornado Shot is arguably the best build for that, and you also have the flexibility to transition into a very fast mapper by strapping on something like a Headhunter and doing a quick weapon swap to Tempest and Rigwald's Quills. And the cool thing about this is you can actually keep that equipped. So in game, if you want to quickly just weapon swap, you can change from a set of weapons over to a different one, which could be your kind of clearing skills with the tap of a hotkey, essentially making you the perfect hybrid bosser mapper in the game. So pretty damn cool in my opinion, and that is going to be my build for the new patch. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed. There will of course be a Path of Building link in the description below, and if you guys have any ideas for the build, definitely feel free to let me know. I'll be updating you guys as I play it through the league, so you guys can check that out. So until then, I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.